Dozens of the biggest names in sports will be taking time off from competition to tell a grand jury what they know about the maker of a so-called designer steroid. Many athletes have been illicitly bulking up with it for years, with no one the wiser until now. At least that's the claim. CBS's John Blackstone has the inside story.
The witness list reads like a who's who of elite sports. Sprint champion Kelly White, Yankee first baseman Jason Giambi, San Francisco slugger Barry Bonds. They're just a few of the top athletes summoned before a federal grand jury investigating Victor Conte, nutritional supplement salesman to the sports stars.
You have the NFL, you have Major League Baseball, and you have track and field. That really makes it probably the most far-reaching scandal ever in the history of sports.
Conte's company, Balco Labs, has been named by anti-doping authorities as the likely source of the designer's steroid, THG, a drug undetectable until recently. Conte denies supplying THG, but his website claims he does wonders for athletes using his plasma spectrometer to find nutritional deficiencies. Balco claims that through precise testing and custom-made supplements, it can adjust an athlete's diet at the micronutrient level, helping athletes attain what they have never attained before. Nutritionists like Douglas Kalman, however, are skeptical.
It would be an amazing discovery, probably on par with Ponce de Leon looking for the fountain of youth.
But Barry Bonds, who has added considerable muscle since his early days, says Conte's supplements have helped. Jason Giambi, another Conte client, is also noticeably more muscular. And Conte has transformed himself, too. In the 70s, he was a bass player for Tower of Power and other blues and jazz groups. Then he got into the huge but unregulated business of dietary supplements, making millions selling a product called ZMA to the general public, as well as to elite athletes, claiming increases in hormone levels and muscle strength. But David Lightsey of the National Council Against Health Fraud says no legal supplement can build substantial new muscle.
That only indicates one thing to me, and that's steroid use or growth hormone.
Now, investigators are trying to discover whether, under the guise of better nutrition, Victor Conte has been helping star athletes beat the system. John Blackstone, CBS News, San Francisco.
If the quote-unquote legal supplements that Victor Conte gave the athletes didn't work back then, what would lead one to believe that 20 years later, that these new supplements do wonders all of a sudden? Like, it's crazy, bro. Like, let's just dumb it down. Hypothetically, if you were an athlete, right? If you were competing, may it be track and field, whatever it is, right? There are literally two GNCs directly across the street from one another, facing each other, right? Like, one store has the regular GNC products that you can buy over the counter, that you can buy from out the store, right? But then the other store across the street, it still has the regular products that's in the store that's available for purchase. However, there's a worker who works there who sells illegal steroids, who has these steroids in the back room that you could get, even if he has to do a blood test to see what your body lacks and what your body is depleted of, and areas that you are deficient in that he can help correct in terms of steroid wise, right? So everybody knows that this guy sells steroids because he's worked at previous stores. He has a bad reputation. However, he's still able to get a job, right? So he's got stores in the past shut down because he sold illegal substances. Now, everybody in that area, as I said, knows that this guy sells steroids, and they know where you can go to get steroids, assuming that you are a clean athlete. Which GNC store do you go into? The one with the steroids or the one that's across the street that sells the regular products? Now, you don't know if the cops, you don't know if the feds is literally watching this store, monitoring this store, and they're doing a secret investigation. You don't know, but you want to keep a clean name. So which store do you go into? It's really simple. Do you go to the one that's selling the steroids or the one where you can just go buy the regular products, right? Now, Victor Conte has never helped athletes get naturally stronger. So why would that change 20 something years later? It just doesn't make sense. And this also applies to this notion that Terence Crawford simply went to Snac to be endorsed, right? When that's already been debunked, because Victor Conte, in an interview with manager Marty, stated that Terence Crawford was the one who reached out to Victor Conte. And typically, the sponsors reach out to the athletes. And you would know this if you are a successful YouTube content creator. You know this because sponsors will constantly reach out to you if you have a huge following. They feel as though that is a big opportunity to be able to promote whatever product and advertise whatever product that they have to bring more attention to their product and to their company. But Terence Crawford reaching out to Victor Conte, it's almost as if he's trying to get an advantage in a certain area, which is nothing wrong with getting an advantage and trying to, get stronger in certain areas, right, where you're deficient. But it's who you align yourself with. You telling me he couldn't have reached out to somebody more reputable, but you could work with somebody cleaner than Victor Conte. I would like to read this article to you guys that I came across on Google, where this newspaper writer who wrote for The Guardian, he's also written for the Chicago Tribune, he must have some kind of importance because Victor Conte acknowledged and responds to him on Twitter, and they actually get into a back and forth, and it seems as though this gentleman by the name of Tim Starks, who Victor Conte refers to as Memo Herdia, who also supplied athletes with steroids and worked with Victor Conte, if I'm not mistaken, but Victor Conte refers to Tim at little B word. But Victor seems to have a vendetta against Memo Herdia, probably because, if I'm not mistaken, I think that Memo Herdia snitched on the entire Balco operation, and I think that Memo actually knows how to outsmart Victor at his own game. And I think he knows that Victor is cheating as well. He knows a lot about Victor, but here's what this article says. It was written by Awful Announcing. It says, Victor Conte blocked me on Twitter and he won't leave me alone. This was written by Tim Starks. This was back in 2014. August 13th, 2014. It says, Oscar Wilde once wrote in a widely paraphrased comment that you can judge a man by the quality of his enemies. Victor Conte, the notorious all-time great performance-enhancing drug supplier turned self-styled anti-PED performer, has spent the last several days attacking me on Twitter on a wild and level that might make me a great man. By the same standard, judging by the efficiency of Conte's attacks, Lil B, Pimple Brother, a fundamental misunderstanding of how Twitter works. He says Conte is most famously the boss of Balco, which allegedly counted as his customers Barry Bonds, Marion Jones, Shane Mosley, Bill Romanowski. He went to prison after pleading guilty to conspiracy to distribute steroids and money laundering. He has spent the years since striking up customers in boxing, among them top names like Andre Ward and Nonito Donaire, both since departed from his clientele, but far from the only boxers who became and remained customers. Thus my interest in Conte as editor of the boxing blog, The Queensberry Rules. He says Conte has associated himself with the Voluntary Anti-Doping Association, a good drug testing organization that has tested boxers and mixed martial artists, and it has gone to great lengths to de-associate itself from him. He has re-emerged in the mainstream non-boxing press as of late because confirmed drug cheat Alex Rodriguez sought out his services, which he didn't disclose until reporters came a-knocking, which of course gives credence to Conte's assertion that A-Rod only wanted some safe, legal non-PED supplement advice from one of the sport's most successful drug cheats, I-Roll. He says, yet Conte has his fans in the sports media and the boxing media. They are convinced he is clean, which prompted the below series of tweets from me about how maybe Conte has done a number of things since his reformation that warrant just the slightest bit of skepticism. That I did this makes me no victim. I definitely threw the first punch. He says to Victor Conte, it's time to have a series of tweets about Victor Conte's heroic crusader. Can provide links for all of this. He says, one convicted fella in biggest sports doping scandal of all time, Conte misleads or outright lies about what happened frequently. He says, X brags about doing his time and not ratting out when Conte sought reduced sentence for the same. He then says, continues to associate with another Balco figure, Remy Corchemi, and name one of his products for Snac PEDs. How cute, he says. He goes on to say, claim he was involved with VADA, which Goodman, which is Margaret Goodman, the owner of VADA, has denied often. VADA's good, but he uses it as a weapon during fight negotiations. It says, since transforming into an anti-doping advocate, has had two athletes that were affiliated with him, Bird and Berto, test positive. Did not publicly disclose that he paid for VADA testing for fighters until after Donaire himself mentioned it publicly. 10. An admitted steroid cheat A-Rod approaches him for help. Conte keeps this secret for some reason. 11. Excellent PED reporter L. Frank reports that according to MLB sources, Bosch during testimony said Conte may have given A-Rod EPO. He then says, "Trust the guy I just described at your own risk." Victor Conte responds by saying Tim Starks is Memo's little B word.
What we specifically did with Balco is we added epitestosterone, and it was in a ratio that no matter when they came, you could put the cream on, and right at the peak of when it would be at a maximum level in the bloodstream, you could collect a sample and your ratio would be 1-to-1.
Balco athletes would have never been caught, and I truly believe that, because the system was pretty much, his system was foolproof. The only way that they were able to catch anybody was because of one coach giving out a list of names. And in that list of names, not only did they destroy track and field, they put a damper, I think, on all of sport, which I don't think was the play. I don't mean to talk bad about sports in general, but the body can only do so much on its own. And I believe that at some point we do start to need help.
This is the July calendar 2003 for Kelly White. This is also in my handwriting. Leading up to the World Championships, which were in Paris. You see these notations through here. Here was the clear, EPO, and the cream, the clear, the cream, EPO here on the 15th. She arrived in Paris in preparation for the World Championships on the 19th.
So these are a pair of jeans that I could fit then. Well, they were very tight then. Now they're 4 sizes too big.
So how much muscles did you put on?
Close to 20 pounds.
In how long?
A matter of a month.
To become so freaking strong and so powerful and so dangerous as a person, it's just incredible. It's like putting another human being in your body and becoming this most, phenomenal athlete. I mean, there was times where I believed I was so great at everything, it was scary.
There are some sports where the culture is so deeply ingrained that eventually becomes the choice you make. Am I going to go over to the dark side in order to continue to progress? Or do I say, look, I'm not willing to do that. It's wrong, it's unhealthy, I'll do something else. And I think in many respects, those athletes have more courage than the ones who say, oh, well, this is what you have to do. I guess you have to do it.
Calendar from Marion Jones, you see the initials there, MJ. This calendar looks like it's in my handwriting. And as you can see, some of these notations are the C is the clear, the undetectable designer steroid. And you see the notation is 15 units, the I for insulin, the G for growth hormone. And you can see this is another growth hormone, insulin, EPO, and growth hormone. And then this is where the track and field, the United States track and field trials began here, the 23rd and 24th. Stuff that I got came directly from an employee that worked at a pharmacy. So you could name anything in a pharmacy that you wanted, and I could place an order, and I could get it. So there were no limitations.
Somewhere along the way, somebody who knows something about drug testing must be involved. It isn't enough to simply design something you think can pass a test, because thinking and knowing are two different things. The testers know how they're preparing the samples. So that means that somebody in the labs somewhere must be involved with wherever there's a designer drug. Somebody who is from an IOC accredited lab must be involved. Not maybe is involved, they must be involved, or they could never guarantee that these things would work.
The scapegoat is oftentimes the athlete. He's the one that gets the positive test and gets told, okay, you're kicked out of sports. We no longer need your services. We already got your gold medal.
But just analyzing Terence Crawford's body for the David Avanesian weigh-in in comparison to the Errol Spence weigh-in, right? You can see an extremely huge body transformation within months, right? major difference in muscle mass, tone, and definition. And I also find it funny that the reporter or the writer highlighted the fact that he wouldn't have never said anything about working with A-Rod had it not came out. It's kind of funny how in comparison to Errol Spence and Terence Crawford fight, nobody would have never brought it up had he not fought Errol Spence, which was one of the biggest boxing showcases. So much attention was pushed around this fight. So it's just natural that it's going to draw so much attention. So we would have never known, that Terence Crawford worked with Victor Conte. But most of Terence Crawford fans subconsciously have developed such an emotional attachment to Terence Crawford over the past few years. Most of their bias is clouding their judgment. This wouldn't get a pass from no other fighter or no other human being possible. Most of them say, well, until he pops dirty, until we see proof, I can't put that jacket on him, right? I mean, ain't nobody ever seen Errol Spence put a liquor bottle to his mouth, but they put the jacket on Spence that he's a drunk. I mean, I don't even think I've ever seen a tweet from Errol Spence talking about drinking liquor. Maybe he has, I don't know. But people would say just because Errol Spence say he didn't necessarily live like a boxer, that could mean anything. Spence has had a history of being a so-called alcoholic, right? And he said that he's changed his life, but nobody is willing to believe him. They'll believe this white man and Victor Conte who said he's changed his life, but when it comes to Errol Spence saying that he's no longer alcoholic no more, he's changed his life, nobody believe him. But if you see Errol Spence hanging out with a man who has the plug on alcohol, and he's always around this guy who sells alcohol, and you see Errol Spence around the alcohol all the time, would you assume because of EJ's history with alcohol that he's buying liquor from this guy? Or would you think that Errol Spence changed his life? And let's just hypothetically say, let's just play dumb. When we see Errol Spence, clips of Errol Spence looking drunk, what if he's just on pain meds? Maybe he's not on alcohol. But you think Crawford fans would believe that? Absolutely not. Then you have videos of Terence Crawford lifting heavy weights. Bro, when I used to do a little bit of boxing, my coach wouldn't even allow us to look at weights, let alone 400+ pound weights. It slow you down when you boxing. We couldn't even touch weights, and if we did, it was light weights, maybe like 10, 15 pounds or 20 pounds. So, he got to working with Victor Conte. He felt like molecule, man. But Victor Conte should not be allowed in boxing, simply because he can cheat the system all too well. He knows it like the back of his hand. So with someone who can circumvent the testing easily, along with the cloud of suspicion, it's too much of a risk, in my opinion, of putting your athletes in danger of potentially being killed, right? Or getting hurt, severely damaged, whatever. But Victor Conte is said to, air quotes, is trying to clean up the whole sport, as Terence Crawford said in a Joe Rogan interview. Then how come he never catched anybody cheating? When him, along with Paulie Malignaggi, has stated on record that upwards of 80% of athletes and boxers are on some form of PEDs. So if Victor Conte is so adamant and is 100% sure that Angel Memo Herdia is cheating and has been given inside information from people who are close to Memo Herdia's camp that can confirm that he's cheating, then why not create some innovative, creative machine that can detect any or all undetectable steroids, right? Why he won't do that? Because Victor Conte does not care about catching nobody cheating. He's seen a wide open space in boxing where there's no stringent testing and the commission doesn't care. Also, Victor Conte is worth millions of dollars. Paulie Malignaggi has stated that one of the biggest reasons that they can't clean up the sport is because they don't have the money for testing. But who does have a lot of money? Victor Conte. So Victor Conte could pay for the tests, but also he works with VADA, so he could also pay for the tests without the fighters, both fighters, worrying about paying for the test. He could pay for the test with the money that he has, but then he could also help the fighters that's working with Snac. He could help them pass the test. So it's a conflict of interest. It's just simple common sense. So he knows how to bypass the stringent testing, and the commission don't care. So Victor Conte is taking advantage of the system. So he'll do things like call out Errol Spence on Twitter for supposedly not doing VADA testing, but it's all covering up the dirt that he's still doing.